So my name is Tim Pierce. I work for the First Responder Network Authority. We're an independent authority within the Department of Commerce, and I think as many of you may be aware that we entered into a public-private partnership with AT&T to help us in filling out the mission that Congress gave us to deploy the nationwide public safety broadband network. So I specifically work with what is called the User Advocacy Group. And so we've been the ones that have been conducting consultation really since 2013, 2014, up through state plan release, and then eventually through governor's decision. So on July 18th, Governor Reynolds elected to opt in to the network for the state of Iowa. And so Iowa, in addition to all the other states and territories, we're currently at 35 states and territories that have elected to opt in. And so what does opt-in mean? It essentially allows AT&T to enter the marketplace to compete with the FirstNet solution for cellular services for responders. And so I'll leave a bunch of that to John to talk about as someone who directly works for AT&T. But you know, even though the governor's made the decision and AT&T is now enter the marketplace and offering the FirstNet solution, it doesn't mean that those of us from the First Responder Network Authority go away. I think in some cases you actually might even see a little bit more presence in some different unique ways. So there's a solution out there today, but this is going to happen for another 25 years is the relationship that we have between AT&T and us. And so if, you know, back in 2000, if I would have stood up here and held a device like this and said, I have access to all of humankind's knowledge in my hand, you probably would have told me to leave, right? So just in 17 years, you know, you see where technology has gone, and then imagine another 25 years. And so through a bunch of unique mechanisms, whether it's user groups or focus groups or different disciplines and conferences, you'll see folks like me that are looking to engage and find out what's the next thing that we can do for our responders. Something that can make your lives better. Maybe it's an idea and just the marketplace hasn't just spurred that. And so maybe that's something that FirstNet can help with, right? We can take ideas and create business cases and take that to innovation and hopefully look for some ways to develop that. And so I think that's something that you'll definitely see from those of us at the authority of, you know, how we're gonna go about this for the next 25 years. So appreciate your time.
I'm John Chambers. I'm the Principal Consultant Manager for the Midwest. I have responsibility for 5 states supporting the FirstNet initiative with AT&T. There's some other gentlemen with us from AT&T today. I'd like to introduce Kyle Spies. On my team, he has responsibility for Iowa. Kyle, if you'll give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, sure. So my job obviously is to be the principal consultant for the state of Iowa to take care of all the first responders. My background includes working in technology sales, with the last 5 of those being in government sales. So really, oh, thanks, Tim. So being able to take care of that and really looking forward to working with all of you in improving communications and responsiveness in the state of Iowa. Thanks.
I'd also like to introduce Steve Devine. Steve is with our Public Safety Advocacy and Strategy Group.
Yes. Thank you, John. So I work on a team of people. I have a public safety background. I was in public safety for 30 years, my entire adult life. Basically, our team works with the sales folks in working on developing public safety integration and solutions, and basically sharing with them your experience, what you need, how you need it, the manner in which it needs to be provided, and to do that. So there's about 6 or 7 of us across the country. I'm based in the Midwest, so you may see a lot of me here and there, but my job is to work with folks like Kyle to make sure that your needs are met.
Thanks, Steve. So a little bit about this portion of the presentation. I'm going to open with a video to give a little bit of overview of FirstNet's capabilities. Then I have a PowerPoint presentation to go through all the details of the capabilities of FirstNet, the solutions, and where we're headed. I'll ask Steve to come up at the end of that presentation. Steve's going to give us examples of use cases for FirstNet. And then we'll wrap up by talking about coverage and also about pricing. Okay, so Ethan, we'll start with this video.
911, what's your emergency?
When disaster strikes, we pin our hopes on the bravery and expertise of our first responders. And from call to car to crisis, they need a fast, highly secure, and resilient network dedicated to public safety. Team AT&T brings that network and more than a century of support for the community of heroes that carry our nation on their shoulders in times of catastrophe. Our network delivers the scale, reach, security, and performance that FirstNet requires to support the public safety marketplace. We are the innovators who are creating the connected world and delivering next-generation 911 services here in the U.S. And we are the proven leaders in unlocking the value of spectrum assets and seamlessly managing a global communications ecosystem. In fact, our annual network investments are nearly 3 times the estimated cost of creating the FirstNet network. Team AT&T is uniquely capable of helping FirstNet deliver its mission for the public safety community. We're bringing together leading public safety communications providers to help FirstNet realize its vision, so public safety entities and first responders everywhere can focus on what matters most: saving lives.
There we go. Okay. A little bit on the history of FirstNet to explain how we got to where we are today. So it was really the 9/11 Commission report indicated that we had a lot of difficulties in interoperable communications during that tragedy because of incompatibilities between communication systems. And the Commission had recommended that we need a nationwide common network to support public safety. So back in 2012, there was legislation that created the FirstNet Authority and allocated funds in the amount of $7 billion and allocated spectrum, 20 megahertz of radio spectrum, for the creation of the FirstNet network. So of that original funding, approximately $500 million has been used to fund organizations at the state level to work with the FirstNet Authority in defining the requirements for this nationwide broadband network for public safety. And they used that input to then write an RFP, which defined the specifications for this network, which then went out to public bid and which was awarded to AT&T earlier this year. So that's how we got to where we are today. So the only way we could really create this large public safety network was a public-private partnership between FirstNet and AT&T. So FirstNet brings the initial kickstart funding. The initial funding is not enough to build a network, but it's enough to initiate the network. The program management, the RFP specifications, the selection, and the relationships that they have with public safety throughout the United States as far as gathering requirements. AT&T is a recognized leader globally as far as building cellular networks. We estimate to meet the commitments we made to FirstNet in the RFP, it'll require a $40 billion additional investment. So we estimate it'll take over $46 billion to build out this nationwide network. And we also bring, of course, the cybersecurity expertise that you need when managing a network for public safety. It will be the target of hackers. So we have to take special precautions for the FirstNet network. FirstNet is the network for public safety. I emphasize the word "the" because there's other entities out there that are saying, oh, well, we're just like FirstNet, or we can do the same thing as FirstNet. There's only one FirstNet, okay? There's not multiple FirstNets, there's only one, okay? And it is the nationwide network that was built on the input from public safety. So it was designed by public safety and built for public safety. There's 2 categories of users. It is a restricted network. So you have to be authorized to be on the FirstNet network. Primary users are police, fire, emergency medical, PSAPs, public safety answering points, and emergency management agencies. Those are considered primary users. The next class of users are extended primary users, and that includes correctional facilities, justice, search and rescue, national security, utilities, nuclear power plants, public health, and many, many others. It's a broad definition of additional public safety agencies. Eligibility for FirstNet is determined by the North American Industry Classification System. So there's a code associated with every public safety agency, okay? And that code determines eligibility to get on this restricted network. And then in addition to that, we have an exception process where we've worked with states that said, well, this particular organization should also be part of FirstNet. And so we work with them, and then we get that approved to get that additional agency on the FirstNet. Okay, in our response to FirstNet, there's actually 16 pillars of commitments that we have made for this network. I won't go through all of them, but I'll give you an overview of the elements. So there's detailed information on coverage. There's commitments on coverage not only nationally, but commitments within a state. And then furthermore, within the state, a commitment that we have to provide rural coverage. So it's not enough to say we're going to provide this much coverage at a national level. We have to get down and say we will commit to coverage in certain rural areas, a certain percentage. It does include commitments for in-building systems, and it also includes deployables. And I'll talk a little bit about deployables more coming up. Let's see. Service plans and procurement. So here in the state of Iowa, Iowa has opted in. Just this week, we executed our contract with the state of Iowa on purchasing. So FirstNet services are now available for purchasing in Iowa as of this week. We'll talk a little bit more about service plans. Devices, I have a slide. We'll talk about all the different devices you can have on the FirstNet network. We have many of them on our table in the back, so you can see all the different device choices that you have. We'll talk about bring your own devices for volunteer fire departments. So we will support volunteers, and we have a method to get them on the FirstNet network. Basic and future services about what we can do today and what's coming tomorrow with additional enhanced features. Priority and preemption is a very important piece of our solution. It's how we can guarantee that we can give access to public safety even on a congested system. So one of the key benefits of the AT&T proposal to FirstNet was instead of just using the 20 megahertz that FirstNet had available, we said let's take that 20 megahertz and combine it with the AT&T commercial spectrum that we have across the United States, in some areas over 160 megahertz, combine them together and give all of that spectrum access to public safety, so that you're not just in a 20 megahertz, but you now have in some areas over 180 megahertz of bandwidth available. And the way we can do that is we then combine that with priority and preemption that says if commercial users are on that network, we're going to move them off the network to give access to public safety. And I have a lot of examples of that coming up in a little bit. And then as I already mentioned, cybersecurity is very important. So we're building a separate security operations center just for FirstNet traffic. I mentioned it's a restricted network. So ICAM is identity, credentials, access management. It talks about who you are, what credentials do you have to prove who you are, and what type of profile we'll build for you based on the access that your agency provides for you. We're also building and have launched an application ecosystem. So we're building an application store for public safety. So you'll be able to see applications built specifically for public safety. We have an applications developer program that's already launched. We have applications in our App Store today, and we have additional applications being designed right now and written by software developers. Local control is how you manage the users in your agency on FirstNet, as far as where you can go to buy devices, what kind of services you want to sign up for, what type of users, what type of access will they have. And we'll take a look at one of those screenshots as well. And then the public safety landing page, that is where you go for everything FirstNet. So it's sort of where you start. Okay, I talked a little bit about the application developer program. It is already launched. It is available today. The good news is there's no fee to join our application developer program. It's free. There's no charge to distribute applications. It's also free. And there's no charge for any agency to go in and review these applications and to see the ratings that the applications have received. We also have solutions for first party, for key services like mobile VPN, messaging, location services, many more. We will work with those agencies that want to bring over their own applications. We have a complete training program already launched in place. Tim mentioned we're in, how many states have opted in now? 35, okay. And so we're in commercial service or production in many of those states where we already have thousands of public safety users that are using the system today. So we already have the training set up for them. We already have the customer support, customer care, which is US-based 24/7, 365. Okay, as I mentioned, there's three categories of users, primary users that I already mentioned, extended primary, and then individual paid users. So we will support those volunteer fire departments that are bringing their own devices for FirstNet service, okay? Okay, now a little bit about the network design and nationwide coverage. So at the top here, you see 3G, 4G, 5G. How many remember 2G? Okay, and okay, now 3G, 4G. We got 5G in test right now. How many Gs do you think we're gonna go through in 25 years? Okay, that's why I said the only way you can really build and maintain a network like this is if you have a partner that's a commercial cellular carrier. Because a commercial cellular carrier has so many commercial users that drive the technology, okay, that are paying for the investment to go from a 4G to a 5G to LTE to 6G for 25 years. So it's a commitment we've made by contract to FirstNet that we're gonna operate and upgrade this network for 25 years. So we'll continue to see those Gs increase every single year. There is a commitment for nationwide coverage, 99% of the population. I have some coverage maps specifically for Iowa at the end of the presentation. We talked about deployables. You could also use FirstNet service on Wi-Fi hotspots. They don't have to be AT&T Wi-Fi, it could be any public Wi-Fi. And you can also use our in-building systems. So the network strategy. Part of this, to meet the commitments to FirstNet, is an aggressive new site build. So every cellular carrier has what they call business as usual, which is a number of new cell sites that are built in a state every single year. Our commitment contractually with FirstNet is we're increasing that number of cell sites in each and every state. So across the United States, it's an aggressive new site build. Priority and preemption are available on the network today. Priority today, preemption at the end of the year. So anyone that signs up for FirstNet service will have priority immediately, all right? Which means you get to the front of the line to get access to the network. Preemption will come as an additional feature automatically at the end of the year. And that's across all of the AT&T LTE bands. So we don't have to wait for band 14. Priority is here today. So we are also building a new core. So a core is sort of the brains of any cellular network. It's where all the traffic goes, okay? So we have redundant cores throughout the United States today that are supporting our AT&T commercial network. And those are the core that we're going to use for launching customers right now. But we are building right now in parallel a dedicated core just for FirstNet. So at the end of the next quarter, first quarter next year, we'll take all the FirstNet traffic and we'll route it to our new dedicated core for public safety. And the reason you want to do that is because now that you have all that traffic isolated from the much larger commercial traffic, we will have a security operations center that's monitoring all the traffic just for public safety. So that's how we achieve a very high level of cybersecurity. So as I mentioned, it's not only a commitment for 99% coverage for the population of the United States, but it's also a commitment that we have to have a certain percentage coverage in rural areas as well. And we're building deployables dedicated for FirstNet, and we'll see a diagram of that in a moment. So here we go. So every carrier today the major carriers have deployables that they use for national disasters, so flooding, wildfires, the tragedy in Puerto Rico. So here at AT&T, we have 300 of those deployable units today that we use for natural disasters. In addition to that, we're building 72 additional deployables dedicated just for FirstNet. So they'll be reserved for public safety. They are full, high-end satellite Colts, they call them, cell-on-light truck. So completely self-sufficient and geographically spaced across the United States and reserved just for public safety for FirstNet. We're also working with states that want to upgrade their state-owned assets that may be deployable, such as trailers, that they want to upgrade those for compatibility with the FirstNet network so that we can put devices, radios on your deployables to connect into FirstNet. So dedicated support, a single 800 number, US-based, and it's already operational. As I mentioned, we have customers in production right now today. And it's a single number, meaning that you will call this 800 number if you have trouble with your device. You call this 800 number. If you have trouble with your service, you call this 800 number. If you have trouble with a FirstNet application, you call the same number. So it's a single point that you can go to get all the support you need instead of going to many different providers. So local control and application, I'll talk a lot about this, and devices. So here's a FirstNet landing page. So this is where you would go to set up your account, what kind of devices you want, how you want to provision your users, their security profile, and your rate plans. So this is where you would, as an agency, you would sign up for service, and this is where you would pick the services that you want. Local control is, for the first time ever, carrier, AT&T, is going to give you visibility into network performance. So no carrier has ever done this. We're doing this because it's public safety and because you need to know the real-time status of the network. So through this local control page, we're going to give you access to information on how the network is performing. You'll be able to see where we have cell sites that are not performing correctly, and you'll see that in real time. So you'll get outage alerts, you'll get traffic alerts, coverage issues, all of that will be reported. You'll be able to see it on this local control interface. And then I mentioned you'll also have an application store. So in this application store, you'll see applications for different types of public safety, fire, you'll see EMS, you'll see law enforcement, and there'll be applications that are specific to particular types of agencies. And here we go. So, so just like when you go to a Google Play Store today, you can see a lot of different applications, and you can see what a definition of what the application does, and then you can see how it was rated. But most of what you see on a Play Store is really, most of it is games and Angry Birds, okay? These are applications just for public safety. So you'll see applications that were written for public safety and evaluated by public safety users. So they won't be rated by the general community. And so we expect that there'll be developers that are writing applications for specific types of public safety. So there'll be applications that are unique to law enforcement that we won't see in EMS, and there'll be some in EMS that we won't see in law enforcement. Okay, so here's one of the landing pages, the administration, where you can select devices. As I mentioned, because we're using the AT&T network, you don't have to wait for special purpose built devices that were being built just for band 14. You can use all the AT&T commercial devices that support LTE. So we have a wide example of devices on the back table. And when you go into this page of devices, you'll be able to see all the devices that are compatible with the FirstNet service. Okay. And a lot of information so far. Any questions so far? Okay. 5G is already in testing already, okay? Rollout, there's a number of different factors that go into the rollout. But if we were sitting in a 3G world and you asked when was 4G coming, it was around the corner. So, oh no, it will not be years. Yeah. Okay. Network visibility. So as long as we're going to tell you network status and we have this page and this information and the maps, we'll also give you network, weather, and traffic, just so you can see all of that in one place at one time. Okay, devices. So let me see, show of hands. How many in the audience are carrying Apple devices? Okay. That's why I asked, okay, public safety. And how many are Android? Okay, all right, well, yeah, usually it's predominantly Apple in public safety. So we support Apple devices for FirstNet. So how many, I want to show of hands, how many are currently on AT&T? Okay, all right, let's see, how many are on Verizon? Okay, Verizon, all right. How many are on US Cellular? Okay, Sprint? Okay, a few, all right. Good, that gives me a good feel for the audience. And yeah, I do. You know, that's like, while being recorded, I can't tell that joke about But yeah, it means it's a huge opportunity for AT&T. That's the good news, all right? So, and that's one of the key elements of FirstNet is the state has opted in. We, AT&T, are contractually committed. We're going to build a network here in the state of Iowa, okay? There's no obligation on the part of any public safety agency to take advantage of our network, all right? It's up to us, AT&T and FirstNet, to demonstrate that we have the capabilities that you want in public safety on our network to convince you to come over to the FirstNet offering. So to leave your current carrier and come over to FirstNet, and we have to demonstrate that we have the coverage that you need where you need it, and that we have the pricing that will make it easy for you to migrate over to the FirstNet service. So that's our mission. There's no obligation that you have to sign up for FirstNet. It's our challenge that we hope to convince you it's a good choice to move over to FirstNet to take advantage of these features. We also have some very rugged devices. Not all devices need to be smartphones, so the XP5, the black one on the left, is a feature phone. We also support tablets and data-only devices, air cards, trunk-mounted modems, as well as tablets, and wearables, which are becoming very popular in firefighting. Okay, so I mentioned truck-mounted modems. Some of the truck-mounted modem manufacturers are actually band 14 ready, all right? So band 14 is that extra 20 megahertz that FirstNet has. And we have a couple of devices in the back of the room that are band 14 handsets that are ready for band 14, and a couple of the truck-mounted manufacturers already have slots in their devices for band 14. So that means you could install it today, use it on the AT&T LTE bands, and it will be compatible with band 14 when that is launched here in the state of Iowa. Okay, quality of service, priority, and preemption. These are very important features. So, and I'll talk about, this is how we really ensure that we can give access to public safety when they need it. So, priority refers to the quality of service, QoS. It's how your packets are treated once around the network. So, for example, if you're doing a voice over LTE call, it has an indicator on that packet about how it has to be treated throughout the network. Priority is how you get access to the network. So I'd like to get on the network, okay, but the network's congested, there's a queue to get on the network. Priority says you get to the front of the queue. The most important of these three is preemption. It says if you're trying to get on the network and the network is congested, okay, and there's no room for anybody else on the network, we're gonna move somebody that's currently doing Netflix or watching YouTube, and we're gonna move them to the side so we can get public safety on the network. So that's what preemption means. And I have a couple examples of how that works. QPP, band 14, and AT&T commercial LTE networks, it means you don't have to wait for band 14 to take advantage of priority and preemption. Priority, as I mentioned, is available today. So if you sign up for FirstNet service today, you'll get priority on the AT&T network, and you'll automatically get preemption at the end of the year. All right, so we don't have to wait for a band 14 build out. It also, since we're combining band 14 with the other AT&T LTE bands, it is a 6x increase in the amount of spectrum available for public safety. So when FirstNet first started, they only had 20 megahertz. We added all of our spectrum. So now you have 6 times the capacity that you had previously. So it's a huge jump. LTE devices are ready today. Some are already band 14 ready. Priority and preemption for primary users at no additional charge. It's in your basic rate. And a new core, the new core that we're bringing up at the end of Q1, supports multiple priority levels. So there's a standards body called 3GPP that defines things like voice over LTE, priority preemption, and they've identified additional priority levels for networks that we will implement on FirstNet when we launch our core next year at the end of Q1. Okay, here's an example, an illustration of how preemption works. So here on the top lane, we see primary users, police. The middle lane, we see extended primary users, possibly utilities. And on the bottom, we see commercial traffic, okay? And then a crisis occurs. And one thing that happened is the black car that might be utilities, it was elevated up to the status of a primary user. So it means somebody that was extended primary, like a good example I use, I'm from Chicago. Lakeshore Drive was shut down by a snowstorm a couple years back, and we couldn't even get ambulances in to rescue people because until we got streets and sanitation and snow plows up Lakeshore Drive, we couldn't get an ambulance to rescue people. It was a mess. So there's an example where you might take somebody that's not currently a primary user and elevate them into primary status so that they can get priority and preemption on the network. So it's, huh?
Who controls that? Is there...
There's a tool called an incident management tool, an IMT. So an incident commander will have that capability to define who gets elevated for the duration of that incident. Okay, so it's on a temporary basis. Primary users are already tagged as preemption, so they automatically have it. So it's like insurance. If you wait till you need it, it's too late, all right? So you have to have preemption capabilities automatically as a FirstNet user. For extended primary, based on the incident, you can elevate them. Yes, good question. Thank you. So now what happens next? The crisis gets worse, okay? And now we have more and more responders, and the network's becoming congested, so we actually had to move some of those commercial users off the network. Now, in the real world, our hopes is we can move them to another band, and in the real world, you can actually take somebody that's using Netflix, for example, and instead of throwing them completely off the network, you slow down or throttle their throughput, and then you can slip in the public safety packets. It's important that I mention, for public safety, for FirstNet users, we never throttle your data, all right? It's really unlimited data, and it is not throttled. FirstNet will be the only one that does not throttle your data. Okay, some use cases. I'm going to ask Steve to come up, talk about use cases. Before I do, are there any questions on the solution, the offering, priority, preemption, anything I've talked about? Devices, developer program, applications? Yes, sir. It varies by state. Here in Iowa, approximately the end of 2019.
I'd also add that right now we've only planned on a 5-year build. There's another 20 years after that. So I would expect Band 14 will continue to be built out over the life cycle.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. Yeah, so the initial build that we committed to in the contract, great question. And we did accelerate the Band 14 build out from our original plans. We pulled in that build out. Yes, sir.
You mentioned bringing your own device.
Yeah.
Volunteer firemen, even a lot of our full-time people use their own device. How does bring your own device work?
It'll be available either very late this year, December, or the beginning of January. But we'll have a process that, number one, the one key element, since the restricted network, as a volunteer firefighter, you have to be vetted by your agency, okay? So we'll take your phone number, your device. You have to be endorsed by your agency that you are a legitimate firefighter, and then we'll bring you over to FirstNet service.
Technologically, how does that work? Do they get another SIM card? Do they have to have a dual SIM card device?
Well, we would prefer that you get an AT&T device, only because you can use an existing, huh?
Imagine that.
Yeah, well, yeah, let me explain why, okay?
FirstNet SIM card.
Yeah, you gotta have a FirstNet SIM card, but more importantly, in the world of over-the-air protocols, okay, GSM is where AT&T came from, and others like Verizon came from CDMA, all right? And they unified when we got to LTE, all right? So LTE is LTE, all right? So yeah, I can put an AT&T SIM card in your Verizon LTE device, for example, and it would work, except when you go off of LTE, all right, it would not work. And the reason is because your device, when it falls off of LTE, goes back to its CDMA chip, which you don't have that. So that's where you go back to that incompatibility. So LTE is the only unifying, and then once you're off LTE, it changes. So that's why.
I'd also add that specifically with the device itself, AT&T has certain bands that it uses, and other carriers use different bands, and so they may not necessarily line up 100%.
So say I'm a volunteer fireman. I've got
Yeah.
an AT&T device, and it's a and I've got FirstNet service.
Sure.
And I'm kicked back, I'm in Des Moines, they have an incident, but I'm there for pleasure, say,
Yeah.
but a personal trip. And I'm watching YouTube. Am I now infringing on public safety's use in a private capacity? Is the usage separated by the?
Yes, usage will be separated by the app. We launched early to give first responders priority right now on the AT&T network. So to answer your question today, we don't distinguish by application. When we move to our new core at the end of the first quarter next year, we'll distinguish by application. Yeah, that's why I mentioned there was multiple priority levels in the new core. That's one of the reasons, because you want to get down where you can prioritize by application. So a police officer, is not doing streaming Netflix, for example.
Not to monopolize the time.
We got plenty of time.
If anybody else has a question, let me formulate my thought, and then
Okay.
you can come back to me.
Okay, anybody want another? Yes, sir.
Question, you said in 2019 you'd have coverage, or that's what the goal was for which to complete coverage. Coverage look like, and is that percentage based on geography or population?
Both, and it's a target, and I will show coverage maps of where we are today and where we will be at 5 years. But as Tim mentioned, Band 14 doesn't stop at a particular point. It continues on. And I mentioned that part of our commitment in the contractual commitment is to build a certain amount of build out. But in addition to that, as a commercial carrier, we have business as usual cell sites that we're building every year, in addition to the accelerated commitment for new site builds here in Iowa. And to put it in perspective, and it may have been glossed over in the video, so FirstNet has allocated $6.5 billion of kickoff funding for the network. We didn't get a check for that, all right? We have milestones that we earn, so as we achieve certain objectives, then we get incremental payments. I mentioned in a slide that we estimate it'll take $40 billion to build out the network that we've committed to in the contract. In the video, we saw that AT&T last year invested $180 billion, okay, in networks across the world. So that's $180 billion compared to the 46.5 that we think it'll take to build. So there's a huge amount of investment AT&T is doing as business as usual. Another advantage of having a commercial carrier as a partner for FirstNet.
Thank you.
Okay, I've gathered my thoughts. So back to our firefighter example, our volunteer firemen. Right now we're using I am responding for responder notification, but we're maintaining voice radio pagers because of the problems with reliability of commercial networks.
Sure.
So if you have volunteer firemen who, they're gonna migrate to their personal device to AT&T, how's that pricing structure work? Are they it's just kind of like we're giving them a gold star, and they're gonna have they're gonna be a subscriber with AT&T.
No, to be clear, you will be a subscriber to FirstNet. Okay, so yes, we have AT&T commercial service, and it's like the other commercial carriers, but then you have something special called FirstNet. So you will be a FirstNet subscriber. You'll be a volunteer firefighter with bring your own device, but you'll receive FirstNet pricing. Okay.
Okay. Most firemen have families. Most of them are on a group plan.
Yes.
So how does that dynamic work?
That's a challenge because, because we recognize that, you may be one of a family and you're on a family plan, but when you come over to FirstNet, you're really on a different service. That's why I wanted to point that out.
We don't want improving service to that volunteer fireman to be disruptive to his family economic, plan.
Right, exactly.
We're going to figure out a way to make that happen.
So if, say me and my wife and we have a daughter with a phone or something.
Yeah.
If I'm going away on FirstNet and then we're maintaining this other plan, there's a problem with that. There's also a problem the other way around, like I can't be giving my wife and my 10-year-old daughter a FirstNet device either,
No, that won't work. But The question is, we want you to come over to the FirstNet service. We want to be able to structure it that you're able to come over and take advantage of the FirstNet services without incurring, you know, a penalty for the rest of your family. The rest of your family will stay on AT&T, okay, because FirstNet is a restricted network. But we want to make it easy to make that transition. Yes, sir.
I don't think I heard the answer about by the end of 2019.
There is a commitment that
Geography, population, was that the clarity you were looking for?
I guess my question was twofold. What was the percentage of coverage, and is that percentage, whatever that answer is, based on population or is it geographic? Because earlier you had stated that 99% of the population was going to
United
have
States, yeah.
access in the country.
right.
So I wasn't sure when it came to the state of Iowa what that would look like from a coverage.
In our proposal to the state of Iowa, which was accepted as part of opt-in, there is a commitment as to percentage of population and percentage of geography, okay? And it's over a 5-year plan, all right, to be clear. That still hasn't been made public, only because this is an open forum and we have competitors that may be in the room. If we're happy to sit down with you and share that information specifically as far as what our build-out plan is. Yeah.
You've got maps you're going to share.
Yeah, and we'll see maps. We'll see maps a little bit later.
Right.
Yeah. But as far as the number of specific cell sites, we don't want to make that public, but we're certainly willing to make that information privately and under non-disclosure.